Many organizations are beginning to panic about AI skills. Executives are rushing to build AI fluency frameworks. Learning teams are designing training programs around prompting and use cases. It feels like the right response. It probably feels like what good leadership looks like right now, but it rests on an assumption most rooms haven't examined yet. These efforts follow the same organizational logic that governed the industrial era. Define a skill, standardize it, train the workforce, and scale it across the company. That approach built the modern corporation. However, it may be poorly suited for the world AI is creating. Not long ago, I was speaking with an executive team that had just spent several weeks designing an AI fluency program for their workforce. The plan looked familiar: define the skills employees should learn, build training modules around prompting and tool usage, and roll the program out across the organization. About halfway through the discussion, one of the leaders paused and asked a question. "If these tools are changing every few months," he said, "what exactly are we training people for?" The room went quiet, because the real challenge wasn't teaching people how to use a specific tool. It was helping the organization learn how to adjust as the capability boundary keeps moving. That distinction points to something deeper than a training design problem. For most of the past century, organizations were built around economies of scale. The idea that producing more of the same thing at lower cost was the primary source of advantage. Expensive infrastructure could be spread across millions of products. Work could be standardized, repeated, and optimized. The companies that dominated the 20th century were often the ones that mastered this logic. But alongside economies of scale sits a different concept that has historically received far less attention: economies of scope. Where economies of scale reward doing more of the same thing, economies of scope reward the ability to apply the same capabilities across many different kinds of work. Advantage comes not from repetition, but from range. AI is beginning to shift the economics of knowledge work in exactly that direction. And most organizations are still building AI strategies using scale logic, trying to standardize and train their way through a transition that rewards something else entirely. One way to visualize what is happening is to imagine a balloon slowly expanding. Inside the balloon sits everything AI systems can reliably do today: writing first drafts of documents, summarizing large bodies of information, generating code, analyzing data sets, drafting marketing copy, responding to routine customer questions. As models improve, more tasks move inside the balloon. Work that once required human effort becomes routine system capability, but as the balloon expands, something else happens that is easy to overlook. The surface area of the balloon grows, so the boundary between what AI can do and what still requires human judgment becomes larger, not smaller. That boundary is where the most interesting work is now happening. It is where professionals decide how tasks should be divided between people and systems, how outputs should be verified, and how workflows should move between human reasoning and machine capability. Every improvement to AI systems pushes the balloon outward again. Tasks that once sat on the surface move inside, but the boundary itself keeps moving, expanding. And the professionals who create the most value are increasingly those who learn how to operate at this shifting edge. You can already imagine this playing out inside organizations. A communications team that once focused primarily on email announcements and internal banners can now produce written updates, short videos, internal podcasts, narrated presentations, and film-quality storytelling, all from the same underlying information. The team hasn't grown, but the scope of what it can produce has expanded dramatically. Or consider an HR leader who previously depended on the finance team to generate headcount and budget reports. Increasingly, that leader can interact directly with an AI agent that analyzes workforce data in real time, surfaces patterns, and generates scenario models. The expertise still matters, but the boundaries of what that expertise can do are expanding. This is economies of scope and practice. Same team, same knowledge, dramatically wider range. And this week, several signals surfaced that illustrate just how quickly that boundary is moving. But before we jump into the signals, let me take a minute to introduce myself if you are new here. My name is Chris Schmelzer, and I serve leaders who recognize the need and understand that the old models of leading and working are no longer keeping up with the pace of change. Every week, I track the subtle signals that a massive reset is coming for what we refer to as white-collar work, and share thoughts on how to lead yourself and your organization through the age of accelerating change. Here are 3 stories from this week that point to this massive shift. Story number 1. Hiring is slowing down. The first signal appeared in this week's Challenger, Gray and Christmas Job Cuts report. At first glance, the headline seems reassuring. Announced job cuts in February dropped significantly compared with both the previous month and the same time last year. But the more interesting number sits elsewhere in the report. Hiring plans have fallen sharply. Companies have announced roughly 56% fewer hiring plans so far in 2026 compared with the same period last year. Layoffs may be slowing, but hiring is slowing even faster. That pattern looks different from a typical economic cycle. In a normal downturn, companies reduce staff because demand collapses. When conditions stabilize, hiring resumes. What the Challenger data suggests instead is something else. Organizations pausing expansion while they try to understand how emerging technologies will reshape how work gets done. If the balloon of AI capability is expanding, the safest decision for many leaders is not to hire aggressively into roles that may soon sit inside it. The signal. Hiring is slowing, not because demand collapsed, but because organizations are reassessing how work will be done. Story number 2. Agentic workflows continue to expand. A second signal came from updates this week from OpenAI and Microsoft, both of which are rapidly expanding what are often called agentic capabilities. These tools move beyond simple chat interfaces and allow AI systems to perform multi-step tasks inside software environments, retrieving information, drafting outputs, coordinating across tools, and executing workflows on behalf of a user. Microsoft's expanding work around agent capabilities inside SharePoint and Copilot points in the same direction. Instead of employees manually searching through documents or assembling information across systems, AI agents can retrieve, summarize, and synthesize organizational knowledge automatically. Enterprise software has always been the infrastructure of knowledge work. When AI agents become embedded inside those systems, they do not simply speed up isolated tasks. They reshape workflows. The employee who spent Tuesday morning manually pulling reports from 3 different systems may find that work simply disappears into an automated workflow. What remains is the judgment about what to do with the results. Each improvement moves another category of work inside the balloon, and with it, the boundary shifts again. The signal. AI is moving from isolated tools to embedded systems that are reshaping how knowledge work flows inside organizations. Our final story from this week, the skill set emerging at the frontier. If the balloon is expanding, the most valuable work increasingly happens at its boundary. This week, researcher Nate B. Jones described this dynamic using a phrase he calls frontier operations. His argument is that the most important professional capability emerging in the age of AI is not simply learning how to use the tools. It is learning how to operate at the boundary where humans and intelligent systems interact. 2 ideas from that conversation stand out. The first is boundary sensing, recognizing where AI systems can reliably operate and where human judgment is still required. As models improve, that boundary moves constantly. Professionals working at the frontier are continually recalibrating where it sits. The second is seam design, structuring work, so the handoff between human expertise and machine capability is clear and productive. Imagine a consulting project where AI agents gather research and assemble facts, while consultants interpret the insights and shape the strategic narrative. The seam is the structured handoff between those phases. Done well, it allows AI to dramatically accelerate work without creating confusion or risk. These are not prompting skills. They are not tool literacy skills. They are the skills of someone who understands how to design the collaboration between human judgment and machine capability. That is a very different thing than what most AI fluency frameworks are trying to build. The signal. As AI capabilities expand, the real skill is learning to operate on the shifting boundary between people and machines. Taken together, these signals point to the same pattern. Organizations are slowing hiring while trying to understand how AI will reshape work. The tools are improving at an extraordinary pace, and the skill set that matters most is not adoption. It is the ability to operate at an expanding boundary that keeps moving. But there is a gap worth naming directly. To truly understand what these tools enable, leaders have to experience it themselves. They have to work with the systems directly, drafting, analyzing, iterating, redesigning their own workflows alongside them. The expansion of capability is difficult to appreciate from a distance. If you can't feel it, you are too far away. Just this week, I started using an AI native platform designed to automate complex browser-based workflows. With a few prompts, I compressed my lead generation process from nearly 3 hours to less than 7 minutes. In that moment, the boundary moved. Those moments are important because they immediately change how you think about work. Many leaders today are being asked to design AI skills frameworks for their organizations without personally operating at the boundary where the technology is changing work. They are designing training programs while still standing outside the expanding balloon, which makes it much harder to see where the seams between human judgment and machine capability actually are. And this is where the tension between scale logic and scope logic becomes most visible. Scale logic says, identify the skill, build the curriculum, train the workforce. It assumes the target stays still. Scope logic says, build the capacity to keep moving as the boundary expands. It assumes the target never stops. Most organizations are applying the first kind of thinking to a problem that requires the second. The organizations that succeed in the coming decade may not simply be the ones that adopt AI tools the fastest. They may be the ones that learn how to expand the scope of what their people can accomplish and develop leaders who know what that expansion actually feels like from the inside. If this resonates, join us as we explore what it means to lead, live, and work in an era of accelerating change.